Today we are going to discuss the very important subject of SROs. Important and under-researched. I've been looking through the literature in Pakistan, PIDE and otherwise, and I find very few papers on SROs. As on many other subjects, our researchers are not really plugged into the reality of Pakistan, and we must try and understand why. So today we are going to look at the impact of SROs on Pakistan economy. I started hearing of SROs when I was a young researcher starting off at PIDE. And I've been hearing about it throughout my life. And though I'm young, I'm not that young. So I've been hearing about it for roughly about 40 or 50 years. I think it was in the 80s that the IMF and the World Bank tried to get rid of SROs. I think it was in the programs of at least the 90s, 2000s, that it was written in the IMF program that SROs would be eliminated. When I was in the Planning Commission, we talked about eliminating SROs. I got a study done on that, and we talked about eliminating SROs. I remember Masood Ahmed was the director of the IMF, and we had a discussion in his office too, and it was agreed that the condition of eliminating SROs would be put in the program, and it was. But lo and behold, SROs are still with us. So we've got a great panel today, and I'd like to explore the subject of SROs and see what we can learn, right? So we've got Dr. Manzoor Ahmed, well-known former ambassador to WTO, knows the Pakistan tax system better than anybody else. So Dr. Saab, welcome to the webinar. We've got Ikramul Haq Saab, who's recently written a book. He was on a webinar. He's a very prolific writer on tax issues in Pakistan. We've also got the chairperson of the National Tariff Commission, Rubina Athar. Rubina, baby, thank you very much for joining us. I think it's a very welcome thing that we have the Tariff Commission with us. Then we've got Gonzalo Varela. Gonzalo is a well-known economist in the World Bank, has done a great analysis on the exports in Pakistan. So welcome, Gonzalo. And then we've got Zahiruddin Dar from Dartways. Okay, or Darthways, very interesting. Okay, so let's begin with Rubina Athar, the chairperson of the National Tariff Commission. Rubina, maybe if you can very briefly, I think best is that if you go with very short, I mean, what I'm going to suggest, but it's up to you, that we have very short interventions so that we can include everybody and have a bit of a discussion amongst you people. I'm just going to be kind of the major domo around here, but it's really you people who have to discuss this amongst yourself and educate us on what this is. So Rubina, can I begin with you by telling us what is an SRO?
Okay. I think everybody has heard the word SRO, but you're right, what actually SRO is. So as the acronym suggests, it's statutory regulatory order. So basically in government, whatever the regulatory instructions, they are in the form of SRO. So SRO is not just confined to taxation. It is for all kind of government regulations. So you find SRO in trade policy, in taxes, in health-related regulations. So all kind of regulations are actually SRO. I think here what we are interested, and probably what we are going to discuss today, is the SROs related to taxation. And more, I think, interest here would be those SROs which gives concession, certain tax concessions or tax holidays or things like that. So I think that's what my understanding for today's discussion is.
Okay.
So I think.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Okay. So SROs generally are of two major types, as we said that in terms of regulations. So one are the procedural, and in the tax context, the other are where we give some tax concessions. So there are a number of SROs in customs where we give tax concessions on import duties, on certain other duties and taxes. And then there are concessions or SROs in income tax, where there are other types of concessions. Some are import-related duty taxes concessions, and other are procedural and all those things.
Mm, mm,
Um, I think what is important here to be discussed is it's a long history, as you said,
mm,
and over the time, the nature or the concessions given under these SROs has much changed.
mm,
And now most of the concessions um, are actually within the laws, and those are through different schedules.
mm,
So individual SROs are growing less. I think there is no further um, as such
mm,
in SROs, concessions through SROs, but rather now all the concessions are through schedules. So for instance, in customs, there is fifth schedule, in sales tax, it's sixth schedule, and in income tax, probably it's second schedule, Ikram sir?
mm,
So these are now the system is moving away from SROs to schedules.
mm, mm,
So I think this is one thing which need to be discussed here. So what is the difference between schedules and SROs?
mm,
And one impression which was earlier that FBR has discretion to issue concessionary SROs, whenever they want to. So now actually that has been mostly through IMF and World Bank interventions,
mm,
now been withdrawn from FBR,
mm.
and now it's either the Parliament or Cabinet which grants those concessions. So I think I'll stop here, and
Great.
whenever yes there is other need for intervention, I'll just.
Fair enough. Mandusa, what's your take? What are SROs and why should we be concerned about them? Manzoor Saab, you have to unmute. Unmute.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
I agree with Rubina. I think she's explained it very well. But there's one thing I have a slight, what should I say, reservation. You know what they have done. You know, Nadeem, you were saying about that IMF and others have forced reduction.
Mm,
So what they, especially when you know around 2013, 14. So, okay, we are reducing SRs. What we do is the same thing. We put under a schedule, the same, exactly the same purpose. Everything is the same. Okay, we say we have reduced so many SROs and we have completely, but there's no change. It's exactly the same purpose. We give some concessions to some sectors, to some persons, and the same. Sometimes there's a condition. Okay, you get a certificate from BOI, you get a certificate from Ministry of Food Security, you get this concession. So the two things, the schedule is no improvement at all on the SRO thing. It's still as opaque and as non-transparent as it was in the past. So you can still have there's a normal tariff. So somebody looks at normal tariffs. Oh, there is a duty of 20%. Say on a paper, a simple thing like paper. Okay, 20%. And then, lo and behold, some influential lobbies like newspaper, they would never give 20%. So there's, okay, you get a certificate from this agency that you are publishing newspapers. So you get your newspaper, newsprint duty free, zero duty. And then There will be some others who would have a little less, not as much influence as newspapers, like packaging industry. Okay, okay, we don't charge you full duty, so you give us 15%. And then there is, like printers of books and, printing industry. And because they don't have a strong lobby, so not only we have the normal tariff of 20%, but through an SRO or through a schedule, whatever it is, there'll be some additional duty, some regulatory duty, some others. So everything, there really has not been any reform. We have gone back. I should add, I'm not trying to show off, but in 2000, when I was in FBR, we were, the FBR, IMF asked us to reduce the number. We had something like 250 SROs, and we genuinely reduced about half of them, 120. And the next year, we reduced them by another half, 60. And we were hoping that this will go on. And over the years, the others will be reduced as well. And in the next 4 or 5 years, we'll finish. But I think the exercise more or less stopped there. And then every year, the number kept adding. So we have now kind of 2 or 3 tariffs. One is the normal tariff, customs tariff we call. One is through these schedules that Rubina has explained. And then we, in addition, we have those SROs as well. So I'll stop here unless you have another question and let others explain.
Gonzalo, tell me, from the World Bank, you advise us, etc. Are you concerned, or is this something that we are overreacting to?
So I think the issue with SROs, as they have been described by my fellow panelists, right, thinking about concessions rather than thinking about SROs that govern the implementation of certain rules, right? So if we take SROs in that definition of concessions, I think they are overall they are pretty bad for long-term development. And they are bad for long-term development for basically, I would say, 3 reasons. The first one is that the whole governing system of SROs is a system that erodes institutions. So erodes the process of policy making, right? They are highly likely to be affected by elite capture. And as it was mentioned before, it is more likely that well-established sectors gain concessions through SROs than new sectors, right? The second is that they, in general, in the way that they are drafted, I've been looking at some examples, right? But the way they are drafted, they are instruments that tend to prevent innovation, right? Because in general, the concession comes with a particular condition, and the conditions are imposed to preserve the status quo, right? So, for example, you may get raw materials at a lower. So, if you're a textile and apparel producer, you may get raw materials at a lower import duty if you are using them in this proportion. And the proportion, for example, can be determined by the input-output coefficient organization. But that is something that is going to prevent innovation. If firms want to innovate and produce differently and have a different mix of inputs, they are going to be quicker to change that than the input-output coefficient organization based in Karachi, for example. So why is the IOCO determining those ratios up to which you can get that concession, right? So in general, they prevent innovation. They allocate resources in a way that follows the status quo rather than allocating resources in a way that is productivity enhancing. And the third is that they create large fiscal costs, right? Because all these concessions create fiscal costs. So I was doing some back of the envelope calculations on, for example, the difference between what FBR actually collects of import duties and what they should collect if there were no exceptions, right? And for example, the differences for food and beverages is about 5 percentage points. So in principle, importers should pay 29.6% of duties, but effectively they pay 24.85, right? Now, those exemptions go to specific groups. One could say, why not reducing the tariffs on food and beverages to 24.85%? It would be revenue neutral and give that concession, let's say, to everyone that wants to consume food and beverages. Instead, what the system of SROs that's currently structured, what it's doing is creating fiscal costs that tend to benefit some groups at the expense of others. So I would summarize, as erode institutions, prevent innovation, and create fiscal costs. I think overall, and of course, everything is more complicated than it sounds. So I'm sure that there are going to be voices here. They're going to explain why it's a good thing to have them. But in principle, I would say the system could be reformed and changed for a system of industrial policy that is more transparent, focusing on supporting innovation and focusing on more equality in terms of the distribution of fiscal resources.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's great. So basically, SROs distort the competitive environment, the production environment, and reduce fiscal revenues. So that's three very important charges that I think we should take into account. Ikram Saab, what would you say to these three charges? Can you defend SROs, or will you still say that there should be, or let me put it even differently. We are not even talking about SROs. We are talking about exemptions. Should somebody get exemptions, Ikram Saab? Does this happen in the world, or how should we think about it?
Thank you very much, PIDE, and especially Nadeem Ul-Haq and all other my very, very respectable participants. This subject has been very close to our heart from the beginning. We started as tax administrators. And Nadeem, you must have seen that there is a 600-page compilation by us where we have mentioned historically all the circulars, and Sultan Mahmood, a young econometric, and now, but has done his doctorate in Marseille University. He's teaching. He was with Planning Commission of Netherlands, and he did for us what was the cost we incurred due to these concessionary SROs. And figure was as high as 5,500 billion in 5 years from 2013 to 2018. I will take you to three perspectives. One is strictly constitutional, that what Constitution of Pakistan says about giving concessions or exemptions through delegation or even directly by legislators. So this is one aspect which I have seen that never been discussed when we talk about these infamous SROs. So this is a very important subject. And then I will take you to taxation perspective and fiscal impact. And the third one will be overall economic impact of these kind of interventions. So if you allow me, I will just share my screen, and where I have put it in a simple way to share with you, so that later on we could have very informed discussion. So can I share my...
Go ahead.
Okay. Can you see my slides?
Nope.
Okay. They will have to perhaps allow me to do that. How to let me see and share my slide. Okay. Is it okay now?
Nope.
Not still. Okay. It's very strange. I am, though, sharing it here.
Yep, now we can.
Okay. So Swiftly, I will go to the impact from three perspectives, as I have said: constitutional, taxation, and economy as a whole. So, my first is that granting exemptions, waiver, reductions in rates, and concessions through SRO never has been debated from perspective of constitution, which is supreme law of the land. It's very strange for me, but I will explain why. Taxation includes also enhancement of rates, giving exemption, and there were flagrant violation of constitution. And underlying idea is that blame lies solely with the legislators that have delegated, rather abdicated their constitution obligation. So quickly, I will go to two articles, Article 77 and 162 of the Constitution. They bar actually even the Parliament not to table any bill in the Parliament, and that makes any variation in any rate, because Pakistan, these all taxes are actually divided and distributed according to a fixed formula, which is Article 160. So why I am just emphasizing this, that first principle that has been Constitution says that no tax shall be levied by the purpose of federation except by or under the authority of the Act of the Majlis-e-Shura. So delegation should, in any case, is not built in 77, and it says that it is the, but the two words I underlined, by or under, are important because FPR and provincial authorities, they are still making SROs, because now provincial authorities levying sale tax on services have this kind of delegation that they keep on changing rates, they keep on adding new services in second schedule, and they keep on doing this without any consent from the provincial assemblies. And same is the case with income tax, because only minister can give now approval. So they have reverted back after fulfilling promise of IMF in 2015 program ended during the dark times, they reverted it back. So this is very important to understand why I am saying this, that you can't do this. This is a very important Article 162 in the Constitution, which nobody has studied so far. Prior sanction of President required to bills affecting taxation in which provinces are interested. No bill or amendment which imposes or varies a tax or duty, the whole or part of the net proceeds, whereof is assigned to any province, or which varies the meaning of the expression agriculture income as defined for the purpose of enactments relating to income tax, or which affects the principle on which under any of the foregoing provisions of this chapter money are or may be distributed to provinces, shall be introduced or moved into the National Assembly except with the previous sanction of the President. So, this article is there since 1973, but no scholar, no tax expert, no researcher has even tried to look at it, that it is strictly barring even the Parliament not to produce any bill in the Parliament with the prior sanction of President of Pakistan. Why? Because he is the custodian of federation. He has to see that if I change the definition of agriculture income, which is in the domain of provinces, then automatically I am encroaching upon their legislative competence. I cannot vary any rate. I cannot make any new tax, new duty, and change the rates. In the presence of Article 162, not a single bill in Finance Act or Finance Bill has ever gone first to the President. Since 1973 till 2020, the last Finance Act, we are seeing this flagrant violation of Constitution of Pakistan. So when Parliament itself cannot make any such law which has negative impact, at Gonzalo was telling that's a fiscal cost, or there is serious repercussions for distribution of tax amongst provinces. For example, if I exempt a unit in Islamabad, so capital territory, or say in Punjab, and Balochistan having very less share as far as their population, 9% from NFC award, they will be the major sufferers. So what we are doing, we are damaging. So I will stop here as far as constitutional perspective is concerned. So even schedules are actually not according to the constitution, or SRO were in flagrant violation of constitution, and Supreme Court also had a verdict on that, that you can only go for rule making and nothing else. So I will stop here, but as a discussion will move, I will show further points. But this is a area which, since I thought that nobody discusses, so I must highlight this. I will end here, but I will continue with other two factors. Thank you, Nadeem.
Absolutely. Absolutely. No, I think this is a very important perspective. But Dar Sahab, would you like to tell us? Ikram Sahab has said this is also not keeping with the law, and we've learned that SROs have many negative tax exemption. Let's move to tax exemption.
Yes, sir.
Negative impacts. What is your take on the subject?
SROs, as everybody has said, were meant to be statutory regulatory orders for the rule making, for regulations, and for doing things of the regulatory or administrative nature. What we have done here is that we have used SROs for exemptions on one side. And on the other side, when we look at the operation of Section 18 of the Customs Act, we levy regulatory duties and additional customs duties through SROs. Through FTAs, again, we have resorted to SROs. The China FTA has an SRO. The PTAs and the FTAs we have implemented through SROs again under Section 19 of the Customs Act. So what has happened here? Like Rubina and Dr. Manzoor have said, that we have moved from SROs to the 5th schedule or to various schedules and tried to do the same as part of the schedule. You can very well say that we have tried to hoodwink everybody by putting the same conditions and the same exemptions in the schedule. There used to be a SRO for the general exemption and a conditional exemption SROs. We converted about 10 years back, we converted those SROs into the 5th schedule to the Customs Act. It's the same thing. But since a lot of things have been said, I'll be very short and crisp here. What has happened over the last 3-4 years now, that we are using SROs to raise additional revenues as well, through regulatory duties and through additional customs duties. It's not only the exemptions. I believe at this point in time, the most impactful thing that the FBR and the federal government has done is imposing of regulatory duties and additional customs duties. That is one thing. The other thing is that whenever there is a conditional exemption through any SRO, and if you want to avail that exemption, you need a certain level of organizational strength. And there is a cost to it, the cost, which is the compliance cost. You need to keep records, certain kinds of records. And then there are periodic audits and other things. So it is not open to everybody. The SME sector can hardly avail these SROs because there are conditions attached to it. So we have, through these SROs, which are exemption SROs otherwise, we have created a clear-cut bias against the micro, small, and at times even the medium scale industry. One more thing, and Gonzalez mentioned it. There are raw materials like, say, steel sheet. If steel sheet is being imported by one industry under exemption, and there is a commercial rate of duty, which is the MFN rate in the first schedule to the Customs Act. Can anybody do anything with those steel sheets except put them through the industry, through a manufacturing process? So what we have done is something totally illogical here. I'll stop here because a lot of tough things have already been said.
Okay, thanks. We'll get to it further. Ehsan Malik Saab, we are very lucky to have Ehsan Malik Saab from the Pakistan Business Council here. So I would like to invite Ehsan Malik also to tell us his and their viewpoint on this. So Ehsan Malik Saab, can I invite you to say something? Ehsan Saab, we can't hear you. Hello, Ehsan Saab? Unmuted to aap hain.
Ji, can you hear me now?
Now we can hear you. Now we can hear you. Fine.
Yeah, okay. So my apologies. I think in my mind, the instrument of SROs is less important. What is more important is, should concessions be given? And secondly, should there be a mechanism to increase the revenue when the government requires it, or to reduce the tariffs or taxes when it is justifiable for industry or for whoever the SRO is directed to help. So I think that I know that there's a constitutional position, etc. I'm not obviously a constitutional lawyer. I can't comment on that. If it is not constitutional, then clearly it should not be used. But the fact that it has been used means that there is some legality behind it. So the argument on whether SROs is the right way to do it or not do it, in my opinion, probably it is not the right way to do it, because the concessions or modifications in taxes should be made in the actual statute and be approved by the legislature. But given where we are, I think this is a methodology that creates the flexibility for the government to assist or to raise its own revenues. So I think on that point, I will just stop.
Manzoor Saab, can you react to that? I think it's an interesting perspective that the government must have the flexibility for both domestic economy reasons as well as taxation for collecting revenue.
We have seen, I mean, just Zaidar just explained, these SROs are for big guys. SMEs, which constitute 90%, of employment, etc., they cannot use them. So he was giving this example of steel sheets. You only know, what would steel sheet somebody do? Paper or anything, you take it. So these are meant only for rent seeking, these SROs. And if you look at our industrial complex, okay, 60% of our Pakistan's exports, etc., industry is through textile and clothing. Why? Because if you want to convert cotton into yarn, you have duty-free import of machinery, you have duty-free import of raw materials, you have energy concessions, all through SROs. So, and you don't allow that for any other, if you want to make any other value-added product, you want to make some high-tech products or anything, that's not available. Second, I give you another example. Now, we have this long-standing auto industry. Only 3 players were so long. I mean, now there's a little change now, because there's an SRO which made it almost impossible for any other industry to come in, because we say when you enter Pakistan, there were many other competitors who wanted to enter. You have to use so much percentage, 40%, 50% local parts, and Mercedes, others were. And India had similar things, but they got rid of it and the Indian auto industry flourished. I can give you so many examples. So that's my response to Ehsan Malik sir.
ये बताइए कि if we I mean, this issue that Ehsan have raised, I think is an important one. Gonzalo, how do you react to this? Should the government have discretionary powers? Sure, we all understand that shocks can happen to the economy, all kinds of things can happen. And when things happen, should the government have the discretion to be able to react to it? As Ehsan have said, should the government have the ability to react by giving exemption somewhere, or alternatively by putting an additional, because now I think I like this thing that we've got different ways of looking at it. Additional revenue as well as additional, fillip to the economy. How does the rest of the world, give us some global experience too, and put us in some perspective.
So I think Malik Saab posed the right question, right? I think this is where I think ultimately we are all trying to discuss that question: should concessions be given or not? And my humble answer to that is yes. But I would alter a little bit the question and say, actually, to me, it's not so much if concessions should be given, it's more how should concessions be given, on the basis of what, and what is the system underlying that. And so if you look across the world, you're going to see that I'm tempted to say all governments in the world provide some sort of support in one form or the other to the private sector. Now, the question is, what countries that have done well in growing their private sector and ensuring more productivity and ensuring more innovation, what is it that they have done? And I think there are three principles that are important in the way concessions should be given, that the way in which SROs are structured in Pakistan, or in general the way industrial policy is done in Pakistan, it doesn't seem to be aligned with that international good practice. And I would say three things on this. How should we think about our concessions? And the way I see it is, first of all, focus those concessions on new things, not on existing things. So, for example, if things have been, if there is a particular sector exporting a particular product that is highly successful, then let that sector go. But there may be many other things that could be done in the economy but are not, because the new sectors don't have the lobbying power that is necessary to get those forms of support. So target those new activities instead of targeting existing activities. The second is ensure that the concessions have a built-in sunset clause. So don't protect forever. And this is something we learned with the South Korea experience in terms of supporting the private sector. Clear sunset clauses that are inbuilt and that are non-negotiable. So we're not prone to rent seeking when the moment of, with the expiry date comes in time. And the third is basically establish a system of benchmarking success. So also price good performance. So if we have a system in which the private sector is supported, if they do new things, which can be more exports, it could be new exports, if they perform well, and the system of performance is clearly determined, and that this protection has sunset clauses, I think we will be getting closer to what good international practices are. I'll stop here.
So great. So basically what you're saying is, okay, this is a tool, as Ehsan Malik Saab says, yes, it can be used, should be used, but the principles should be clearly enunciated and should not be discretionary. And that's very important. And the three principles that you give, I like those. New sunset clause benchmarking, very good. Agreed. So Rubina Bibi, you are with the National Tariff Commission. Now, surely you have, as the chairman of the National Tariff Commission, you have a lot of authority and people listen to you. So tell me, what role does the National Tariff Commission play in sort of taking the principle that Gonzalo says into account? How do you police the tariff system, at least in terms of SROs?
Thank you, Nadeem. I think I was just going to say, so why we see this rampant system of SROs, concessions on the one hand and additional duties on the other hand. So there is a conflicting policy right now going on. On the one hand, we are giving concessions. On the other hand, we are putting extra taxes on it. I think the one reason behind this is that our import tariff rates are very high. So since the rates are high, there is always need to give some concessions to some of the sectors. And the revenue need of the government always, like pushes FBR to increase additional taxes, like what Zahir was saying, additional custom duties and regulatory duties. So there should be some balance, some balance in these concessions and additional duties. And this can be done only if we gradually reduce the tariff, overall tariff. And I think this is where what we are doing right now under the new national tariff policy. So what we are doing is that we are trying to gradually reduce the tariff so that whatever concession which is available to any one sector or any one particular industry is generalized and it is available to others also. So what we are right now doing is, and Gonzalo is also with us in that exercise, that we are trying to reduce the fifth schedule. So I think everybody knows about the fifth schedule. We just said that there are most of the concessions under the SROs are now transferred to fifth schedule. So what we are trying to do right now is to reduce the fifth schedule and bring whatever concessions are in the fifth schedule to first schedule. So then those concessions would not be for any one particular sector, but it would be for everyone by reducing the tariff rate, not giving any concession through SRO or anything. It would be generally reducing the tariff rate. So that's how we are dealing with this. It's a very lengthy process because the complications that the FBR has made over the last many years, they cannot be undone in so quickly. So we are doing it gradually. That's our plan, is to want to reduce the overall tariff rate, average tariff, and secondly, reduce those concessions, which are either in SROs or in fifth schedule. So since I'm dealing only with the customs, so I'm talking about only the fifth schedule. So this is something we are planning to do.
But Madam Rubina, let me ask you a simple question. I remember that around about 2007-8, our tariff system had become clean and we had reduced our tariffs to a reasonably low rate, not very low rate, but reasonably low rate. And we had 3 slabs or 3 lines. And then came a fiscal crisis of 2008, and we slapped regulatory duties. In fact, I was there when it was done, and I objected. I said, look, this is crazy. Why can't we go? But anyways, I lost. That's clear. Then came the additional customs duties after the regulatory duties. So the point, and then we'd also reduced SROs to a very low level. Then they proliferated. So the question is, unless we take strong, credible steps, we will reduce them now, and the first sign of trouble, we will increase them. Am I right? Or am I right? Or
sorry, I didn't get your question. So increase.
My question is that we did reduce them in 2008.
Yes.
We did get down to a reasonably neat situation, not the best, but reasonably neat situation. And then they multiplied over time. Am I right on that? If I'm right on that, how will you prevent it from happening in the future? Because what happens is we do clean up the system, then it messes up again.
Yeah. No, you are absolutely right. If you look at the history I was just looking at, it was exactly in 2007-8 that there was again rise in SROs and then gradually to fifth schedule. And so these famous 565, 567, 675 SROs, they came in 2007-8. Now, why they came? Because we were in the process of gradually reducing the overall tariff rate. at that point, suddenly FBR decided to raise back the tariff. But when they started or thought about raising the tariff, so obviously there came the need that certain sectors or certain industries need lower tariff. So that's where these famous 565 for industrial raw materials and machinery, and then the auto sector 569 or something, those famous SROs came at that point. The only reason was that FBR needed more revenue. So they raised the overall tariff rate and gave these little concessions to those sectors. Now, as I said earlier, so now what we are doing is, so we are gradually reducing. I think the big step that government has taken in last 2 years was shifting tariff from FBR to Ministry of Commerce. And that's where there is now pressure on FBR to raise revenue through administrative, like measures, rather than raising the tax rate. So they cannot, so they have no, I won't say that they have no say. They have their say, but still they are not the authority to determine the tariff. Tariff is now determined in Ministry of Commerce. So all, as I said, these proposals, they are prepared in National Tariff Commission. We do all the research and all that, and we then present it to the Tariff Policy Board, where there is participation from all the relevant ministries, industries, BOI, FBR, Commerce. And then that's where it is decided now. So that's the basic difference, I think. And that's where some hope is that we would be able to get rid of all these concessions and all these distortions gradually.
Thank you. Zahir Saab, you seem to know the Pakistan tax system well. Nikram Saab, both of you can comment on this. Who does the research for tax policy? How are tax policy proposals prepared? I mean, it seems to me that many budgets come in, there's no real research. I mean, who does the research? Is there any research wing of the Ministry of... Oh,
well, I have been working in FPR for quite some time. Till the year 2000, I was there. What happens is that every year, FBR receives a plethora of proposals from everywhere. And the time available to look into those things, to those proposals, and what is in those proposals is we get proposals from, say, the Federation, from chambers, from associations, from individual companies, from Pakistan Business Council, from everywhere. And hardly any research is done in FBR at that time. And now Ravina is handling it in the National Tariff Commission. And I hope some research is being done now. The concessions and the protections both are primarily a product of lobbying. Whosoever lobbies more, whosoever has the political clout would bulldoze his way through and have his proposal done. And I can give you scores of examples on it. For the last 20 years, I'm not working with the government. I resigned from my job in the year 2000 and became a free man. But my own experience of when I was working with the government was that it was every concession was the product of lobbying. No proper research was done. No policy was made the way a policy should be made. Even I can take names, I can give you names of the companies, and I believe it would be unwise if I start taking names here, but mostly. Dr. Manzoor mentioned auto industry, the kind of lobbying they do. We all know it. Now, what has happened in the field is that on one side, they have a higher rate of duty, a rate of duty higher than anything else in Pakistan. And on the other side, they have concessions. Under SRO 655, They can import their raw materials on zero rate of duty. They can import their CKDs. In case of new entrants and in case of electric vehicles, the rates are even lower. It has created a total disconnect between their cost of production on one side and the market price on the other side. So instead of gaining profits, they are profiteering. The exemption and the rate of duty have to be seen together so that there is a connection between the cost of production and the market price. One more thing here. The National Tariff Commission used to work the effective rate of protection. The NTC was not previously working on the nominal protection rates, the so-called cascading of tariffs. The effective protection rate, I don't think it has been calculated over the last 20 years for any item whatsoever.
No, we are still doing it.
You are still doing it. In how many cases? In how many cases?
Most of the cases.
No, the cases which come to you.
Of
But
course.
in the general tariff, what is happening here? Like, because we are using these SROs on one side for raising revenues and on the other side for giving exemptions, I'll give you a concrete example. In the pre-engineered steel buildings, if it is imported as part of the plant and machinery, the rate is 0%. But if somebody is manufacturing those pre-engineered steel buildings in Pakistan, the customs duty and the additional duty and the regulatory duty, all three are imposed on their raw materials, and the cumulative effect is 20% plus. It becomes a case of reverse cascade. If somebody is paying 20% on raw materials and the end product is being imported by somebody else, like silos are imported under 5th schedule at 0%. The farm buildings, the greenhouse buildings are imported at 0%. But if somebody wants to manufacture those, we have levied additional customs duties and RDs on the raw materials. So if we look at the operation on both sides, on one side for raising revenues and the other side for giving concessions, we are killing our industry practically.
Fair enough, fair enough.
There is no balance here.
Ikram Saab, can you give us an idea on what the cost to the economy is? I keep hearing that exemptions or tax expenditures. First of all, can you also explain what are tax expenditures? How are they different from what we are talking about? And we have also estimated what is the cost of tax expenditures. Can you give us some idea of what the estimates are? Very quickly.
Yes,
Nadeem, I'll ask the same question. Go ahead.
They have been calculating this, and economic survey carries one chapter, which is tax expenditure. Last 2 years, we have seen that cumulatively this government provided like 2.3 trillion of tax expenditure. So you can see that it is such a large number when you compare with the revenue collection, and with this kind of tax expenditure, they said we could have made ML1 and ML2 without taking loans from Chinese or anybody else. My point here is that all the discussion that we do is we are snatching the power where it should lie. Why the standing committees don't prepare finance bills, as in the rest of the world, they are eyes and ears of the elected parliament. Here, why these, whether it's Tariff Commission or FPR, why they receive these kind of proposals from industry? Are they legislatures? Are they supposed to make legislative changes? Not at all. Therefore, I started from the constitution. You are always talking about symptoms. Everybody is talking about symptoms. And cost is very high. I have documented it in the book, and you have seen that per year cost was not less than 500 billion. So 20 years, if we multiply, we did not need any money from IMF or World Bank then. Had we low rate of taxes and not giving these kind of exemptions and concessions. But question here is not this. Question here is that now forget what happened before decade of democracy. From 2008 to 2021, we are talking, there is no intervention from the institution we keep on accusing. Now, if the political parties in these 12 years have failed to discuss this issue on the floor of the parliament, and as I showed, the constitution forbids them, why? I think you are a collection agency, FBR. Your role is not in policy and in legislation. Why you receive and you on your website ask, send us your proposals. What happens in UK, for example, from where you have borrowed this democracy, this parliamentary? They have house committees. House committees prepare policy and legislation. They take input from all, from experts and everybody. There is always even live telecast to see what kind of national interest they have to see in their economic policy making. Here it is, we always say it is a lead capture. It is also institutional capture. Why FBR or National Tariff Commission is taking the role of legislators? That is my main objection. Unless we go back to the roots. No, if they are giving exemption to an industry, there should be a debate for a reasonable period of time. I tell you what they do in India. India, they have just presented their bill in the very first month of January, although their year starts from 1st April. So 4 months, there is public debate, there is debate within the parliament, there is input from all, and then they go for these kind. There is no concept of SRO in India. Even rule-making power there is subject to constitutional approval within 90 days. So if you choose a wrong way and then you keep on complaining that this symptom, why don't you go and you uproot the root cause? So unless it go back to the legislatures, nothing will happen, because people will keep on influencing, as the Hiruddin Saab said, people will keep on influencing the executive. Executive has no role to make legislation. They are collecting agencies and that's all. But I will show you a little later when this debate should shift from here to the root of the problem.
Fair enough. I agree. We've been trying to get Parliament to take an interest in things, but Parliament is not interested, so we can't do much about it. Gonzalo, let me come to you before I go to the floor. This figure of tax expenditures. What is the cost of tax expenditures in the economy, or the cost of the SROs or the exemptions, whichever way you'd like to put it? I'd also like to point out the World Bank has done TARP for $150 million in the past. You've got another big program, $400 million that you're doing. So, I mean, in a sense, does World Bank take any ownership of this mess?
Well, let me first say that I am a humble senior economist in the World Bank, first of all. But let me say that actually,
so if we're going to your management, we hold them responsible for this mess.
If we're going to quantify the costs of, this messy system of concessions or exemptions, even the intention actually shows the problem. Why? Because there is very little data available to have a credible estimate of the cost of these exemptions, and the fact that there is little data out there to evaluate that, and this goes to your point when you open this seminar, that is there's little research, and the reason there's little research is because there's little publicly available data, transparent data, and that goes to the fact that these SROs are opaque in nature, right? But I wanted to point to one cost that this brings, because you can see, and I've been hearing the different panelists, and I learned a lot. And it's true that SROs means decreases in revenues, but in some cases they also mean increases in revenues, right? Like the ACV, many ACV increases or RV increases come in the form of SROs. Now, some are benefits for the private sector, some are increases in revenues for the central government. But there is a cost that is sort of a deadweight loss that has to do with increased cost of doing business, even for those that are eligible for the concession, right? And let me give you one example, and this also goes to what Madame Robina was mentioning before about the fifth schedule and the need to simplify the fifth schedule. So if you own a cinema, right, you need to have these automatic regulating instruments for your projectors. Yeah, this is HS code 9032-8990. I don't think anyone not owning a cinema will want to import such a regulator, right? No one, there's no purpose, right? Now, this is in the fifth schedule. So if you comply with the conditions, you will get a reduction in the duty. The duties are relatively small, but you will get a reduction in the duty. Now, to comply with this condition, you need the Ministry of Information, Culture and Broadcasting to certify you, and you need to be within the input-output coefficient organization quota, right? So, of course, this is the cost. This is the efficiency loss, because the rest is transfers from one to another one, right? And there are equity considerations, and that's an important issue, but this is a pure efficiency cost. So I'm a foreigner, and as a foreigner, I ask you, non-foreigners, is what would be the benefit of empowering these institutions to provide these certifications that come at a cost for the private sector, and to make the policy-making process so complicated? Wouldn't a trust-based system be better? And that is combined with audits, random audits, and you see if someone is bringing these apparatus for illegal purposes, it gets fined. But who is going to bring these apparatus for illegal purposes, right? So the crucial element here around the exemptions is how complicated the system became and how certain institutions gain power that normally they wouldn't have anyway, and they absorb resources, right? Apart from increasing the cost of doing business, they also absorb resources. So what would be the risk of moving to a more trust-based system, audits, doing away with certain public institutions that are just there sort of to put sand in the wheel of the private sector? I think that's where the most immediate cost to be eliminated seems to be. This is just an opinion.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough. No, very good. But
can I say something here?
Gigi, please go ahead.
I mean, FBR, I think, publishes every year, and last year they published that the cost of expenditure is about 1,150 billion. That's about 30% of our total revenue.
Right.
But the more important thing is what Gonzalo was just saying, is the efficiency cost plus the opportunity cost. You look a few years ago, for example, compare Turkey and Pakistan, and they had similar textile and protection of automobile industry and this. But then they moved on because they wanted to join the EU, and they had to get rid of these SROs and concessions or protection. And now you look at it, their 150 billion of export is mostly machinery and other things. On the other hand, because of these SROs, we are stuck with the same textile 60% and the same auto protection and the same everything. So the other important thing, in addition to what the cost is, it is the opportunity cost.
That's a heavy charge, very heavy charge. My favorite, Manzoor Saab, is, and correct me if I'm wrong, this used to happen a while ago. I hope it's still not happening. You remember, I was very fond of construction in buildings, and I investigated why there are no tower cranes in Pakistan, because I find it very odd. Even today, I find it very odd. There are no tower cranes in Pakistan. But then I discovered this some 10 years ago, that tower cranes could not be imported except by builders. Now, when I see in the rest of the world, tower cranes, company that owns tower cranes is different from the construction company because nobody wants to carry that capital cost on their balance sheets. So they rent tower cranes. But the rental market is banned in Pakistan virtually, I mean, in a sense, not disallowed because you can't import a tower crane for renting it out. You can only import it if you're a builder. I hope it's changed. But there are so many other things like this that also exist there that you almost rule out a market, like the silos were talked about. You almost rule out a market. Can I import silos and rent them out to people to do this, or has my business got to be agriculture before I buy silos? So I don't know. Do these things still exist?
Okay, Rubina wants to say something. Yeah, they still exist, but there's a slight difference that sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay, the slight difference that there's so much duty.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'll stop here.
No, you go ahead. I mean, somebody else is speaking on the. I don't know. Go ahead.
Okay. No, they still exist, but what happens is like a crane, you import it and there's so much duty, so you use it for 3 years, so they charge you so much duty. But Nadeem, you know someone, his father purchased a crane was disused and he wanted to export it and they wouldn't allow it. They said you have to pay a duty on this disused thing. So there's all sorts of cranes is very, very complex even now. Okay, I'll stop here.
Dr. Nadeem, you need to unmute yourself.
Sorry, Uzma. Uzma has organized the webinar. Uzma is a lead on this. Uzma, go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. I think very useful discussion is going on. I have two questions here. The first one is that how we need to see SROs in fifth schedule. Will these SROs be further reduced, or how they are different from those which are not placed in fifth schedule? Because there are a few which are not placed in fifth schedule. So what is the difference among all those? And the second question is that more we see SROs in rent-seeking perspective, if we look at the reality which is happening in our country, is there any significant possibility of positive negotiations behind these SROs? Does it happen or not?
Okay. Do we have Ibrahim Kusumbi?
Karachi Chamber of Commerce and Industry.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you very well. Go ahead.
Okay. I very much endorse the views of Zahiruddin Saab and Mr. Manzoor and Nadeemul Haq. Our experience being the Chamber of Commerce, Karachi Chamber of Commerce and the Karachi contributing a lion's share of taxes, we have first-hand experience of these SROs. And I would say that the SROs have, the culture has created oligarchs and monopolies to an extent, and over a period of time, they have become so powerful that all SMEs, the greatest damage has been done to SMEs who are on the fringe. And it is a kind of shackle that is unbreakable, because once again, every year we submit our budget proposals and visit Islamabad or have meetings. We see those powerful lobbies, trying to have their way and continuing those concessions. I'll give the example of time has, I think, since 2011 and now, I would say we have lost no less than 3,000 to 4,000 billion rupees in that concession alone, because there was no differentiation between actual exports and the domestic sales. We did not have a borderline on that. So whatever wrong.
We're losing you.
Were utilized for domestic sales. And we could not collect this total of about 2,000 billion rupees worth of textiles produced in Pakistan. Out of that, we exported about 600 to 700 billion, and rest of it was sold in Pakistan itself. But the collection of tax was about 6 billion, which is really nothing. The greatest damage, I would say, at any cost now we should get out of this. And as Nadeem Ulhaq Saab also suggested, these policy decisions should be made by elected representatives and the parliamentary committees, not the FPR. Secondly, the other problem I see with the SROs is that soon after the budget, what we see is a stream of SROs coming out, amending the previous SROs and amending the rules. It makes the tax system and tax regime so complex that even people like me who understand a little bit of taxation cannot really keep track of those changes in the and amendments in the laws. And it is very difficult to make business decisions based on those this kind of complex tax regime. So we need two things: reforms, it's simplification of taxation system, entire tax regime, and phasing out of the SRO culture. I'm glad that yes, part of this responsibility or policy making has been moved to the Ministry of Commerce. But unfortunately, there too, I would be blunt to say that even the one or two or couple of ministers within the cabinet itself are trying to support certain lobbies and vested interests. So it's really a kind of a hopeless situation. I see the same situation happening again in this coming budget, and this is the time that some decisive action should be taken to bring an end to this SRO culture.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Mohammad Khurram Sahab. Mohammad Khurram.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Under normal conditions, we can discuss about the SROs and its fiscal costs.
A little bit. Can you just tell us who you are, please?
Yeah, yes, sir. So I am basically a PhD student from Namal, Islamabad, and
Go ahead.
yeah, and yes, and I was just like saying that under normal conditions, we can discuss about SROs and its fiscal costs, like tax concessions. But what about the extraordinary circumstances, such as in the current pandemic? Like, don't you think that it's like necessary to have the tax concessions for some of the businesses who are facing loss during this pandemic, especially?
Fair enough.
Thank you.
Dr. Saab, can I respond to it?
I'll come back to you. मैं सारे questions इकट्ठे करूँ. Dr. Muhammad Shoaib. Shoaib Saab, are you there? जी बोलिए. Shoaib Saab is not there. Okay. Mahmood Khalid.
Thank you, sir. I have very simple two questions. One, putting all the SROs in the form of schedules, doesn't it amplify the problem? Because if we say that the SROs pertain to the rent-seeking behavior, it is going to be there now for sure for a quite long period. Second question is that the tax expenditure report which the FPR publishes, I believe that it's a severely underestimated effort, because once the SR is given, especially in the domestic sector, how much actual transaction happens once the taxes has been lowered or any benefit has been granted actually is not taken into account. So maybe the fiscal figures which they give in the form of lost taxes is much more, even in terms of their own computation.
Okay, good question. Okay, Dar Saab, go ahead. Why don't you start responding to these questions and give us your thoughts?
Dr. Saab, may I also register my question?
Ji, Shoaib
Yeah,
sir,
please.
मैं आपको पूछा था. जी, Shoaib sir, please, I try to get hold of you. Go ahead, ji.
Well, thank you very much, first of all, for letting me know about the seminar, and especially grateful to Dr. Ikram Ulhaq, who sent me the message. My experience of 4 years as a tax ombudsman, honestly, I'm of the view that this SRO culture has destroyed whatever governance we could have got in the FBR. I saw that SROs were used to override the legislation, in some cases to supersede the legislation, and in some cases even to replace the law. So I don't think you can allow this. I understand the last question was about emergencies like this COVID, and I think whatever emergency, the matter has to go before the parliament, and let the parliament decide whether they want to do it or not. But this SRO culture is mainly to satisfy different lobbies, and those lobbies have over time, led to so many distortions in the working of FBR and in the working of our government that in the governance structures in this country have been totally destroyed, I would say. And FBR is one of the most critical institutions of the state, because if you cannot collect taxes, you can't do much about whether any developmental activity or welfare activity or whatever. So I think we need to be very seriously considering to stop whatever is going on. Yes, I dealt with some cases where even the rules, had superseded the law, and there was total impunity. Nobody would be bothered within the FBR that they should sort of avoid to do things which are not legal. There is hardly any distinction on, honestly, between what the law says. People even don't care what the Constitution says. So, if, for example, the Constitution clearly says that on financial matters, the stay would be maximum for 6 months. The stay would be continuing for 5 years, 10 years, And I had to face a lot of difficulty at the hands of the topmost lawyers in this country, who all ganged up and told me that I can't touch this matter. And I still went ahead, and finally, we were able to make some dent. But the real problem is that in the beginning, the questions which were raised by Dr. Nadeem Haq, I think I honestly am on his side, and we should get rid of this nonsense. Thank you.
Thank you, Nizam Haji Sahab.
Ji sir, I hope all the economists will back me up, but I'm going to say.
Hello.
Revenue collection is a product of two functions.
Go ahead.
One is the economic activity and the other is the tax rate. If you alter tax rates in a manner that it kills economic activity, there will be no revenue collection. And for doing that, we need to have a very delicate balance. We need to invest into economic activity a lot. What we have been doing over the last for the last 40 years, I've been looking at budget exercises every year. That was part of my job. At times, we have been trying to kill economic activity in Pakistan by fiddling with tariffs. Or what we have been trying to do is to put a straight jacket onto the economic activity. Favor 1 and disfavor 20. This is what we have been doing. So the tariff rates and the tax rates have to be adjusted in a manner that they generate economic activity. And unfortunately, we have been doing other way around. And these SROs at times have been killing economic activity in Pakistan. And in the name of more revenues, we have been increasing our tariffs and tax rates. May it be sales tax, may it be excise duty, may it be customs duty, or even the income tax. When we look at the income tax exemptions, the way they are there, again, it has a clear-cut bias in favor of a certain class of businesses and industry. This is what I needed to say. Yes, we are into a pandemic. We are into an economic crisis. And the only way we get out of this economic crisis is by generating economic activity, not by killing the economic activity by raising taxes. Thank you, sir.
Fair point. Very good point. Nizam Haji Sahab, aap kya keh rahe hain? Just a second, let Nizam Haji come in, then I'll come back to you, madam. And Nizam Haji Sahab? Haji Sahab,
Can you hear me?
Ji.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you, boliye. Just introduce.
This is Nazim Haji from Karachi. I'm an industrialist.
Okay.
One of the panelists rightly mentioned that the SMEs have suffered a lot because of these concessions and exemptions that have been given to the large-scale industry because they cannot get benefit of it. Basically, what's happened in the past, and I can give you examples, that the commercial importer actually feeds the SMEs because of the economy of scale, which they require to import consignments. And this is where I felt that we've been crying hoarse to the government for the last 50 years when I was the chairman of the Site Association, that we need a level playing field. Therefore, and I would like to address to the National Tariff Commission, yes, you need to give concessions, you need to give incentives to new industries that come in for a limited period, but in a competitive environment. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Rubina Bibi, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I think whatever is said here, I think the only way what I could say here is the only way to get rid of these SROs and the schedules is to reduce the overall tariff rate. Like what Zahir was saying, if the purpose of tariff is not to raise revenues. If you look at the world around, customs tariff or the import stage tariffs contributes only 1 or 2% of your total revenue collection. Whereas right now in Pakistan, the import stage tariffs are 47% of your total revenue. So the need there is to mobilize more revenue through domestic taxes like income tax and sales tax, and lessen our reliance on customs duty. So the moment we reduce the overall tariff rate, these concessions or additional duties will go away. So I think that's the only way. And that's, I think, what the tariff policy is trying to do now. Let me just answer one of the two questions the participants here raised. Like Uzma said, what's the difference between SRO and fifth schedule? So practically there is no difference. So many of the SROs earlier are now merged into fifth schedule. So, and I think it's famous. Dr. Manzoor's one example is we were talking about the conditions in the fifth schedule. So one is the dentist chair. और dentist chair के साथ condition ये है कि it is used by the dentist. So what does that mean? Who else can use that dentist chair? So I think what we are now doing right now is, maybe once this analysis is completed, we will share it with you. On the fifth schedule, so we have identified something like out of 1,500 tariff lines, 500 tariff lines where there is absolutely no need to keep it in fifth schedule. So the effective rate is almost the same as in first schedule. And in some cases, there are no conditions. So we are proposing in this budget to transfer at least these 500-600 tariff lines to the first schedule. Uh, so what we are planning to do is then we would look at all these conditions and one by one see these, like these frivolous conditions, how can we get rid of these conditions and transfer the tariff lines to the first schedule. Then we are going to look at all these SROs and see where, like these for industrial raw materials especially, how can we lower the rate and transfer them to the first schedule. So effective rate is one. I think Zahir was some point earlier saying, if you look at the actual collection, if suppose the MFN rate is 20%, but the actual collection is at the rate of 5% because we have given so many concessions. So why not put the rate 5%? The revenue would not be effective. You are already collecting the revenue at the 5%. So this is what we are doing now. So hopefully in a year or so, we would be able to do this. And one, I think, question came here, and Zahir was saying that proposals used to come like in a last month or 2 months, and we couldn't do any analysis. Now, under the tariff policy now, we start receiving proposals in the month of July. So we've been analyzing those proposals since July.
Sure.
So it's not only in the last 2 months that we do.
Okay.
You are still laughing. I can understand.
I've got no questions to ask, but I'll keep them to myself.
Yeah, no, that's right. No, I think everybody, this is such a issue that nobody can trust that. But I completely understand.
I don't see why you need proposals from people who have a vested interest. I mean, I sat.
But these are proposals from the industry. So I think
but I mean,
we have to just look at what is the possible way that people can approach you. So we have.
Let me ask you a simple question that I ask everybody.
Yeah.
What is the possible way that universities, people like us, can approach you? You get proposals from the rent seekers. You don't get proposals from your own academics.
No, we do.
When? How? We've never been.
No. Plus, send us the proposals. You never send any proposals.
But you never even invite us to the table.
No, we do.
I've been sitting on these tables, madam. I used to say this all the time at the risk of great unpopularity. Why do we only invite? Once I sent a peon down and I said, count the cars, right? And check the cars. He came back, they're all BMWs, Mercedes. I said, why have we only got BMW, Mercedes here? Why don't we have people coming on bicycles? But we don't, unfortunately. So anyways, let me leave it at that. Let's go to Humayun Mazhar. Humayun Mazhar Saab, bataiye. Humayun Mazhar Saab, I think if I'm right, bataiye, please introduce yourself and say something. Humayun Mazhar?
Sir, Humayun Saab has left.
He's here. Go ahead.
देखिए, the main problem is आपकी कोई भी long term.
Humayun Saab बता दें, Humayun Saab is a tech investor. And
I work for the Crescent Group.
Crescent Group.
We are predominantly into textile, sugar, then steel, and other businesses. I think your comment about rent seekers, Dr. Saab, is very correct. The issue here is short-term thinking. So आपकी कोई भी policy and ये जो सारी SROs आ रही हैं, वो vested interest की वजह से immediately आ जाती है. So I'm just gonna, textile is a subject I'm very familiar with. अब पाकिस्तान में अगर आप देखें तो
keep it in English. We got Gonzalo here, so keep it in English.
Okay. So the major export is textiles. The value-added part in that is very nominal, and it will not increase till we do what Bangladesh has done. And if you're looking at something which will boost the economy in the immediate near future, that's something, you have to give all concessions possible to value-added sector and nothing else.
Okay. Humayun, can you please also comment on the tech sector, since you are an investor in that area? How does this affect you guys? How does our tax policy and these things affect you guys? The SRO culture, the exemptions and the ADCs, etc.
Luckily, so far, we are blessed that we are not on the radar, so there is not much. But the recent package, the incentive package which the government has given for angel investment and venture capital investment, SCCP ka jo the new sandbox, I think that's very promising. So, so far, so good on the tech sector.
Okay, great. Okay, Ikram Saab, go ahead. Ikram Sahib? Ikram Sahib is there or he disappeared?
Yes, Nadeem, the three issues from these questions are generalized. One is that in 2016, we proposed a simple tax model that if you lower the rates of your duties as well as income tax and sale tax, and you grow and you allow people to grow, and then you will have more taxes. And people here are posing as if no such model has ever been prepared or research has been made. So Prime did that study, and in 2020, we have an enlarged and second edition of that. We have tackled all these questions, and PIDE has also published a book where we have taken historic and critical review of the tax reforms in Pakistan. So having said that, I now try to be very specific. Dr. Shoaib has practically seen what happened, and I also started with the things that when we don't follow what is the constitutionality in any country, then all kinds of captures here and there they start. I'm not saying you are critic of legislators, they are not coming, but PIDE must ask me that one day I shall ask all the standing committee, joint Senate and National Assembly, who are revenue and finance, that they should participate in a manner that they should tell us they don't even in a position to read these laws and understand them. Very few people in Pakistan can even understand the kind of complex, and we make in each finance bill so many changes in those laws that one loses track of. If you go to the FBR website, you will see that their own laws are not updated because so many SROs, and then one SRO is amended 100 times by another SRO. One is rescinding that, what is altering that. This kind of system cannot work. What I'm saying is that first of all, you will have to simplify, and you will have to move your paradigm. There should be a paradigm shift from taxes to growth. When growth is there, when you are supporting your SMEs, you are supporting your industrial base, you are supporting your every sector. I will say every sector of Pakistan is important, but what important from the standpoint of growth. Taxes are byproduct of that. But if you have simplified, and if you have system where we can very easily collect taxes, here you cannot even fill your income tax return at your own. It is 20-page nonsensical thing asking you how many ornaments your wife or your spouse has and where is it kept, what is the weightage. So this kind of nonsensical procedural things, and then compliance cost is so high. So growth cannot take place in this position. All other things that we have been discussing, we all know. But what the solutions are? Solutions are there. You have provided 2 studies. PIDE has done 2 studies. And we have a one-day full, seminar on that, doing taxes better. Then you have another study, investment, and we have contributed 5 books, and we have contributed about 2,500 pages. But neither these businessmen nor people sitting in institutions are ready to read, go for research, and apply their mind. If we will keep on going like this, we will always have these kind of webinars, we have seminars, we have symposiums, but problem will remain there. So let us shift. There should be a paradigm shift. And paradigm shift I have already enlisted, and I will request that next time, let us call them, that they should come and they should tell us that why they are not interested in legislation at all. And why then when you create a vacuum, then all kind of vested interest will come in. Why they don't come in Germany, why they don't come in France, why they come in many, even I can tell you, Asian countries. I have been studying almost every country's tax, and I have been working with IBFD since 1984. And I haven't seen this kind of practices, malpractices rather, which we have in Pakistan. Even near home, if you take Bangladesh and India, there is no concept of SROs. Everything is in the law. If you want to create exemption, create exemption. If you want to levy it, these are all political questions, and they have to be decided by the politicians and through standing committees. And we should help them. We should give them their research. We should invite them. We should engage them in our dialogue. Otherwise, we will keep on, wasting time here and there, because I have been, since 1984, writing on taxation and worked as a tax administrator and now also as a tax practitioner. So I have 4 caps to produce that. I have produced research, I have worked as a tax administrator, I have also worked as a tax representative now of many industries, big industries, and I also have research. I have my interest in research. So the solution, we should now go for solution-based webinars where after problems, its second follow-up should be what viable solutions we can offer.
Fair point.
That's where I will
accept your frustration, Ikram Sahab. I totally accept your frustration. We all feel the same way. Unfortunately, we've got a country that doesn't want to think. So over to you, Manzoor Sahab. Manzoor Sahab, please tell us your last words, thoughts, comments. But most important of all, what I feel, understanding Ikram Sahab's frustration, what I feel is that research and thought has no room in our policy at all. I've been in the Ministry of Commerce, I've been in the Planning Commission. Honestly, we have no interface with the research or academia. We mainly think that vested interests can come to us with proposals. And I was amazed when I sat in those meetings at the discussion that was taking place. So Manzoor Sahab, how do we fix our policy process? I mean, our policy process, Ikram Sahab is right that Parliament should do it, but Parliament also needs research. I mean, I see here in the US, for example, the 1.9 trillion bill, somebody raised the issue of pandemic. Yes, they're passing a 1.9 trillion bill, but they're passing the bill, and a lot of research has gone into it. Lots of people are commenting on it. The debate is taking place between Yellen and Larry Summers. I mean, they are all academics. That's the way things go here. Unfortunately, in Pakistan, the debate takes place between the lobbies. So Manzoor Sahab, how do we fix our policy process? How do we get this right?
Thank you very much. I come to your point in a minute. Just 2 other points. All the discussion this evening, almost everyone, whether it was businessmen, whether it was academics, maybe Pakistan Business Council, a little reservation, but otherwise everyone, including our ombudsman, they were all that these SROs are a disaster and we need to get rid of them. My second point is that since this tariff policy board was set up, they're making good progress. They have, since I worked with them for 1 year with, on that board, and they have good people who are doing their research, who have data and everything. They're making good progress. The only problem there is that so long the industries are getting their raw materials at low rates, they're very happy. But you cannot touch any of them. I mean, you cannot touch auto industry, you cannot steel industry, paper industry, any one of them. They say, no, don't touch us. But you can reduce you can give us benefit, but don't touch us. Someone raised about this question about pandemic. You see, I think at the time World Bank did a study. They said, these are the things that are used for COVID. And these are 2 countries which have the highest tariffs. And Rubina said it again and again. Otherwise, we wouldn't need that SRO, because other countries, they never have these tariffs on essential medicines and others, because they're already very expensive. So they come at 0. But we are the only country. I think we and maybe Brazil or some other country, but we had the highest tariff. And then what do? We say we reduce it for 3 months, then another 3 months. You have to, this is an opportunity, get rid of them. So, finally, your question about policy process. Well, I mean, first, these things should be away from those who have a vested interest, like FBR. Their vested interest is raising more revenue. They don't see any other impact, just raising revenue. And so we have to get rid of that, like they have done for custom tariff. gone to Rubina's department. But I hope that continues, because in the past it was just 1 or 2 years, then it gets back. But I hope that this continues. But you were right that I've been FPR, etc., and academics. Rubina, although she denied it, but I've never seen any proposals from any academics about anything. They maybe some universities said, why don't you allow us to import this 3D printers for our research, etc., and things like that. One specific thing, and even that was not done. So yes, we need. And the other thing is, you're giving example of US and things. Every senator or every chairman, he has a very, what should I say, qualified research guy there doing everything, all the research.
Not many.
Everyone, I think almost everyone.
Have not one staff member. They have a whole staff. They've got 5 or 6.
No, they're allowed, I think, 2 or 3. There's a certain amount. They say you can have 4 or 5 or 2 or 3, depends. But and that's the same with the EU. That's the other thing. Unfortunately, even if we have them here, they would only use them for their telephone connections or driving, etc. So that is. I think maybe we have hundreds of people there, there's spare staff, but that's not used for research, and they're not taken for research. And that would be a very good point to make here for this, that every one of them should have this thing, so that our these young graduates find jobs there. I mean, we have 500 or 600 MNAs, etc. And if everyone gets 2 people, so that would be a lot of jobs for our students. Thank you. That's enough for me.
But Gonzalo, coming back to you, answer these questions and tell us what you think. But quite frankly, Gonzalo, you have the biggest seat at the table. So the World Bank should tell us. They've been guiding policy for the last 30 years. How come under the watch of the World Bank and the IMF, this mess has been created? Program after program, World Bank TARP after TARP, and we have this huge mess of a tax system, which, we've got the best minds in the country. Nobody could explain this mess. And this mess sort of bobbles its way through our history of economic mess. So Gonzalo, can you please tell us?
Yeah, I think you tend to overestimate the role that we play or that we can play. Ultimately,
I don't. I sat at the policy table for 3 years. So I know very well where the proposals come from. I know what happens. I know Ilango used to deal with the Prime Minister directly. I know the other guy, the guy before Ilango, used to deal directly with the Prime Minister. I mean, getting access also means carrying responsibility. And I'm afraid that the World Bank remains silent and dark, doesn't carry responsibility, just has access.
So on the area of trade policy, we have been doing a lot of outreach, and we have been doing a lot of, sharing proposals, discussing international good practices. This is, and also supporting the build-up of capacity. If anything, you were mentioning before the need of research for policy making. I cannot agree more with that, and I think Madame Rubina's leadership in National Tariff Commission is a very good example of how things can be done, looking into evidence and bringing evidence into policy making. I think that is an example to follow in many other institutions. But again, our role is to provide recommendations and to support policy changes that we believe are positive. So, for example, we are in full support of the simplification of fifth schedule. We are supportive of a process of tariff rationalization that brings down tariffs on raw materials and intermediates for everyone, not just through SRO for specific sectors, but for everyone, but also at the same time gradually reduces tariffs on final goods. And at the same time, I would say, and with this I will conclude, I think ultimately this question of SROs is a question, as Esan Malik said very rightly so. This is a question of whether concessions should be given, and that brings the bigger question of industrial policy and how industrial policy should be done in Pakistan. And I think here, and I will stop with this, I will reiterate what I said at the beginning. Industrial policy is not a yes or no, it's about the how. And the how, more and more, I believe Pakistan should move into a way of supporting activities that are new, against performance indicators, against performance targets, so benchmarks of criteria for success and failure, and building in sunset clauses into support. And institutionalize that as much as possible, make it a rule rather than a discretionary approach, and continue supporting, but under those premises. I think that would be a positive move away from the system of SROs that is currently in place, and in favor of a more dynamic system that would boost innovation.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, Rubina, maybe let me just give you the last word. Rubina, maybe, and maybe that's if anybody else wants to say anything, please come in. But Rubina, maybe let me ask you a simple question. I mean, I'm very happy to see that you are now getting research-based, more proactive, and you have the authority to do things. So can you please, I mean, we are very happy to collaborate with you, and I would urge through us, we can bring the whole university sector. How can we cooperate with you? How can we get our recommendations to you? How can we get our analysis to you? Because PIDE does a lot of work on this. In fact, the input-output tables and the effective protection work was all done at PIDE. And in fact, I think it's still the gold standard. I don't think anybody does it more than us. So how can we engage with you, A? And B, Rubina, maybe I have another question. What's happening in cell phones now? Can you explain that to us? I mean, we've got new SROs, and cell phones have become very expensive, and Humayun Mazur is here. Doesn't that affect your industry at all? When cell phones are becoming very expensive, and at the same time, we've got somebody who's now got a license to manufacture cell phones at home. So are we going the car route, or is it some other experiment? Can you please explain this to us?
Thank you, Dr. Saab. I think cell phone, probably I don't have a much idea, because that's something which is going on in the Ministry of Industries, and everybody could understand why it is going on.
They've got an SRO.
Why it has not come to tariff policy, and why it is sitting there. So sorry, I won't be having any comment on that. But in terms of collaboration, I think it's definitely there is a need for it. Right now, we are trying to build a research team in National Tariff Commission, but honestly speaking, there are very few people. We definitely need to collaborate with the academia and research organizations like you to get into the details of what the tariff policy should look like. You specifically asked how we can do it. I think we can organize seminars with you. We can have discussion with you where we can, I think I would be very much interested in this study that you are doing on this SROs. Since I said we are looking at the fifth scheduler, we're trying to gradually reduce it. So this would be a very, I think, informative input for that exercise for us. I think at the same time, I completely agree with what Ikramul Haq is saying, that the national assemblies or the standing committees should also play a role in it. It's unfortunately, they are not competent enough right now to analyze these things and of course, there are huge vested interests again sitting in those standing committees. But there should be some process to engage them, and some process to make this whole system more transparent. So I think this is where I would conclude my point of view.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much. I think it's been a great webinar. We've learned a lot. Anybody else wants to say anything? Now is the time to say, Dar Saab, you want to say anything, or anybody else? Ikram Saab, anybody? because otherwise, if not, then I'll just simply say thank you very much. It's been a wonderful webinar. I do hope that someday we'll come to this simple tax policy that everybody wants. Shoaib Sarul Saab, Ikram Saab, everybody wants a simplified tax policy. Unfortunately, I don't think we have the wherewithal to do our own research. So somehow it doesn't happen. And then every donor comes around with a new report. There are about 10,000 reports on tax policy. None of them have been peer reviewed. None of them being understood. So, and every FPR agent is carrying around his own proposals. I've been at budget making sessions where proposals came in from the dark and they were always the same proposal: tax, cell phone tax, SMSs, tax this, tax that. So I used to joke with them that, you know, you will tax every newborn baby without thinking. But in any case, that's where we are. How we'll come out of this mess is a billion-dollar question. I don't think we'll come out of it very easily. Takes a long time for countries to wake up, and I hope we will someday. Thank you very much, folks. We'll inshallah call on you again and again because we really need to learn from you. I think this is the only way knowledge happens, and this is the only way a debate happens. And it's only debates that lead to change. You can't force